Handcuffs clicked shut on a $50,000 suit. The CFO of a $2 billion company was being walked out of his own boardroom in front of everyone who had ever feared him. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, because the man who brought down was sitting right there at the table. Not a detective, not a federal agent, not a lawyer, the man who mopped the floors, invisible for 9 years, watching everything, writing it all down in a $2 notebook that nobody ever thought to check. $71 million, 4 years. One man nobody looked at, until the morning he made sure they had no choice. He had cleaned Gordon Harp's office for 9 years, 4,000 nights, give or take. And in all that time, Gordon Harp had never once looked at him. Tonight, he looked. But by then, Elroy Webb had already seen everything. Chicago in late October was not a gentle thing. It came at you cold and decided the door swings open into wind. Not a warning. Just the thing itself, arriving all at once. The gap between your collar and your jaw. The backs of your hands before you reach the stop. The particular way the city's night air carried the smell of the lake even this far inland, something mineral and permanent underneath everything else. Elroy Webb stepped off the 47 butts at 9:40 p.m. Same stop. Same cracked curb. Same orange flicker from the streetlight above the alley entrance that the city had been promising to fix for 2 years. And had not fixed and would not fix, and which Elroy stopped expecting them to fix sometime around the beginning of year 7. He did not rush. He never rushed. The back of Caldwell Financial Tower rose in front of him. 32 floors of glass and steel going up into a sky the color of old pewter. From LaSalle Street, from the front, the building looked like money, like the kind of certainty that didn't need to announce itself. From the back, it looked like what it was, a place where the trash needed taking out. He swiped his badge at the service entrance. The scanner beeped. The gray metal door clicked open. He stepped inside and let the cold follow him 1 second before he let the door fall shut. The basement hallway smelled the way it always smelled, industrial cleaner, old coffee from the break room 3 doors down. Concrete that had been here a long time and would be here long after everyone inside the building was gone. He walked to the locker room. 4 metal lockers. Fluorescent light humming at a frequency just below the level where most people would consciously register it. Elroy had noticed it for 9 years and never said a word about it to anyone. He opened the second locker from the left. His navy coveralls hung on the hook inside. Pressed. Clean. He pressed them himself every Sunday evening. This was a thing no one in this building knew and no one would have believed. On the inside of the locker door, 2 things were taped to the metal. A photograph. Elroy, maybe 40 years old, in a charcoal suit he no longer owned, shaking hands with a man whose name he no longer said out loud. The offices of Webb and Associates in the background, glass-fronted, their name on the wall in brushed aluminum letters. He had been so proud of those letters. Next to the photograph, a newspaper clipping. Small article, business section, November 2008. The headline, Webb and Associates closes doors as a mid-market collapse. There was a quote from Elroy in the second paragraph. He had given that quote to a reporter standing outside his now empty office, still believing the worst was behind him. He had been wrong about that. He put on his coveralls, left leg first, right leg, zip up the front. He reached into the pocket of his street clothes and pulled out a worn paperback. The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. The spine had cracked so many times it had stopped trying to hold itself together. He slipped it into the chest pocket of his coveralls and headed for the supply closet. 9 years of the same building. 9 years of the same floors, the same offices, the same rhythms of a place that never fully slept. You learned things working a building like this. Not the way the executives learned it, from their corner offices and their quarterly reports. Not the way the security team learned it, from their cameras and their patrol routes. You learned it the way water learned a house. From the inside, from the cracks, from every corner that needed attention at 2 a.m. when no one else was around to give it. He started on the lobby level, emptied the wastebaskets near the security desk, wiped down the reception counter, ran the dry mop across the marble floor in the slow, overlapping strokes that left no streaks. The security guard on the night shift, a man named Maurice, who worked this desk with the careful, hurried dignity of someone who had worked nights long enough to know the night rewarded patience, said good evening without looking up from his logbook. Elroy said good evening back. Then he pushed his cart toward the service elevator and started moving up. People assumed work like this was mindless, that because your hands were doing something routine, your brain was switched off, that you were simply present the way furniture was present, occupying space without generating thought. Elroy's mind had always worked best when his hands were busy with something repetitive. And tonight, as he moved from the lobby up through the lower floors, something had been sitting in the back of his mind since 7:14 p.m. Not painful, just impossible to stop noticing. He had seen Brett Colson leaving the building at 7:14 p.m. Then he had seen Brett Colson's car pull back into the parking structure at 10:02 p.m. as Elroy's was unloading his cart near the service elevator. Brett Colson did not come back to the building after 7 p.m. Elroy had never seen it. Not once in 9 years. He filed that away. Kept moving. The 8th floor needed extra attention. Someone had spilled coffee near the East Printer Station and wiped it up themselves, badly, in the way people who were not used to cleaning things did it, which meant the sticky residue had spread across a larger surface than the original spill, partially dried, and was going to require the orange label cleaner, not the blue. He dealt with it, moved on. The 16th floor was fast. The marketing team left the place relatively ordered on weekdays because their creative director had a thing about clutter, and everyone was slightly afraid of her, even though she was 4'11" and communicated primarily through post-it notes. He liked her post-it notes. They were always direct, never passive-aggressive. Just, the printer on the west wall needs new paper. She signed them all with a small stashed on his name. He wondered sometimes what she would have done in a different industry. Compliance, maybe, or investigation. The 24th floor, the legal department. He moved through it carefully, not disturbing the document stacks near the big conference table. The legal team shredded more material than any other floor in the building, which was not unusual for a legal department. But the volume had increased since Brett Colson became COO 3 years ago and started attending their weekly briefings personally. Not evidence of anything. Just another stone in his shoe. He had collected those stones for 9 months. He pressed the button for 32 in the service elevator and felt the familiar slow rise of the car. It ran slower than the passenger elevators. Made a low mechanical sound on the way up, like it was thinking about the journey before committing. He leaned against the back wall, reached into his chest pocket, pulled out the Benjamin Graham, book opened to where he had left off, chapter 14, the margin of safety. Read 2 paragraphs, returned the book to his pocket. The doors opened on 32. The floor was quiet, the way expensive places were quiet. Thick carpet absorbing every footfall, the central air whispering through vents in the ceiling. Silence that had a price tag. He started his routine. Trash cans in the outer offices first, then the glass wall conference room, then the bathrooms. Methodical. He always worked methodically, not because he was slow. Because the difference between doing a thing right and doing a thing fast was the difference between doing it once and doing it twice. He had spent too much of his life doing things twice. He was turning the corner toward the main executive corridor when he stopped. The light was on in Gordon Harper's office. Not the overhead fluorescence, the desk lamp, and the blue-white glow of a laptop screen. From 30 feet down the carpeted hallway, he could see it clearly. A thin bar of light under the door and through the narrow gap in the blinds. He checked his watch. 11:09 p.m. Gordon Harp was not in this building at 11:09 p.m. on a Tuesday. Gordon Harp left by 7:30 on a bad day. By 6:30 on a normal one. He had a standing dinner reservation on Tuesday evenings. He had a driver. He ran on systems and did not deviate from them. Elroy stood still in the hallway for a moment. Then he pushed his cart forward. Through the narrow gap in the blinds, before he reached the door, he caught a glimpse of the desk. Papers spread across it in multiple directions, not neatly stacked, but opened flat the way you arranged things when you were reading them all at once. And your hands could not keep up with your brain. Elroy's eyes caught a number, one number, on the top right corner of a form on the left side of the desk, a routing number. He did not stop walking, did not slow down, obviously. But his mind, which had spent 18 years reading numbers, exactly like this one, which had memorized the routing structure of dozens of financial institutions over the course of a career that had ended badly but had not stopped living inside his head, caught that number and held it. Then his mind caught the number on the wire transfer authorization visible on the right side of the desk. The 2 numbers did not match. He reached the door, knocked twice, soft silence. He knocked again. "Mr. Harp, it's Elroy, cleaning crew. Just checking if the office needs service before I move on." A pause, long enough that he thought the man inside had fallen asleep. Then the voice came through the door, low, wrecked. The voice of a man who had been talking to himself for hours or not talking at all, which came out the same way. "I said nobody tonight. Go away." Elroy should have left. He knew that. 9 years of understanding exactly where he stood in this building's hierarchy said, "Leave." The understanding of what happened when a man in a cleaning uniform pushed against a boundary that was never explicitly drawn but was understood by everyone anyway said, "Leave." But something in that voice, not anger, not exhaustion exactly, something broken underneath both of those things. He pushed the door open 6 inches, slowly, not barging, just enough. The smell hit him first, scotch, the good kind, peaty and heavy and expensive, and under it, the smell of a room that had been closed up for hours with someone's dread sitting in it like a second occupant. Gordon Harp was behind his mahogany desk in the dark. The desk lamp was angled away from him, like he had moved it deliberately so the light would not reach his face. A glass of scotch sat on the right corner of the desks, still full, 3 or 4 hours old by the smell of it. Papers everywhere. Not just on the desk, but on the floor around his chair. The way papers ended up, when a man had been reading them for a long time, and picking them up and putting them down, and picking them up again. Gordon Harp, 58 years old, self-made, name on buildings in 3 states, sat in the middle of all of it looking like a man who had just understood that everything he had built his life on was sitting on sand. "Sir," Elroy kept his voice even. "I'm sorry to bother you." "Then don't." Gordon did not look up. $48 million, gone, and I'm sitting here like I don't know my own building. He was not talking to Elroy. He was talking to the room. Elroy stayed in the doorway. His eyes moved across the desk with the same automatic attention they moved across everything in this building. He was not trying to read the documents, but he saw them the way he saw everything, which was completely. The forensic audit report on the left, flagged sections, red circles in the margins, the wire transfer authorizations on the right, the compliance verification forms between them, and the routing numbers, 4 digits off. On every single form he could see from where he was standing. Elroy's brain did something it had not done in 15 years. It went back to work, not the work he did with the mop, the other kind. He opened his mouth. Then stopped because from the other end of the hallway came footsteps. Not the tentative footsteps of someone unsure of their welcome, the footsteps of someone who owned the floor and walked on it like a reminder of that fact. Elroy turned. Brett Colson was walking toward him, 49 years old, dark gray suit, not a crease in it, blue tie sitting exactly where a blue tie should sit, hair combed back without a strand out of place at 11 o'clock at night in a building he should have left 4 hours ago. He was carrying nothing. No bag, no folder, just walking. His cologne arrived before he did, sharp, expensive, aggressive, the kind of scent designed to announce a person. Brett's eyes moved from Elroy to the open office door, then back to Elroy. He did not speak immediately. The silence between the moment he registered Elroy and the moment he chose to address him was calibrated. The kind of pause that was itself a statement about who was required to wait for whom. Why is cleaning crew in Mr. Harp's office? Not a question. A verdict delivered in the form of a question. He was not asking Elroy. He was asking the air somewhere to the left of Elroy's ear, which was its own kind of statement. "I knocked. I was checking if the office," he said, "not tonight." Brett's voice did not rise. It simply landed flat, like a door being shut without slamming. "This is a restricted floor. There are sensitive documents in every office up here, and you're standing unsupervised in the middle of it." Gordon's voice came from inside the office. "Brett," he was just checking. "Gordon," a tone shift. Subtle but unmistakable. The tone of a man used to being the one who decided when other people stopped talking. "I'll handle this." Brett stepped closer to Elroy, 2 feet away now, looking at him with an expression that was not quite contempt and not quite dismissal, but it was somehow both at once without being fully either. "You got something in your pockets that shouldn't be there." Again, not a question. "No, sir, then you won't mind." He raised 2 fingers toward the security station at the end of the hall, a small, efficient gesture. He had made it before, and not recently for the first time. Elroy stood still. 2 security guards came off the elevator 3 minutes later. Both of them had the look of people being asked to do something disproportionate and required to look comfortable doing it anyway. "Empty your pockets," Brett said. Elroy looked at Gordon, just for a moment. Gordon looked away. That look away said more than anything else that had happened tonight. It said everything about the distance between these two worlds and the ease with which a man on the right side of that distance could choose not to see across it. Elroy reached to his pockets. Left pocket, 3 keys. His apartment, his locker, the storage unit where he kept Ruth's things. Right pocket, his phone. Older model, screen cracked in the upper left corner. Back pocket, the book. It fell to the carpet when he pulled it out, one of the guards. Betta looked at the cover. His eyebrows moved slightly, just enough. Brett saw it. He smiled. Small, controlled. The kind of smile that did not need to be large to say everything it intended to say. The intelligent investor. He said the title the way a person says something that was a private joke and has decided to make public. Mop boys don't need that kind of reading. The guard looked down at the book in his hands, at his own hands, said nothing. Elroy said nothing. His jaws was his eyes level. His breathing did not change. He had been in this room before. Not in this building, not with this man specifically, but in the version of this room that he had entered in various forms, across 54 years of being exactly who he was, in exactly the country he lived in. He knew this room. He had been in it many times. And he knew that the exit was not through the door Brett Coulson expected him to use. "Check the cart too," Brett said. They checked the cart. Spray bottles, clean rags, trash bags, a thermos of coffee, half full and still warm, his equipment log on a clipboard. Nothing else. Brett looked at all of it, still not satisfied, which told Elroy that satisfaction had never been the goal. "Service elevator," Brett said to the guards. "Get him off this floor, and I want an incident report filed tonight. Authorized access to a restricted executive area. Potential exposure of confidential documents." The guards walked Elroy to the service elevator, one on each side, unnecessary and known by everyone present to be unnecessary and happening anyway. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Elroy stepped inside. He picked up his book from where the guard had placed it on the floor of the car, put it back in his pocket, straightened his coveralls, pressed the button for the basement. The doors began to close. In the narrowing gap, Elroy looked down the hallway, past the 2 guards, past Brett Coulson, standing with his arms at his sides, watching, all the way to the end of the corridor where Gordon Harp had appeared in the doorway of his office. Gordon was watching too. Elroy looked at him directly. No performance in it, no drama. Just a man saying what was true to another man who needed to hear it. "Check the routing numbers, Mr. Harp. They don't match the compliance." The doors closed. Silence in the hallway. Brett stared at the elevator doors. The guards looked at each other. Gordon Harp stood in the doorway of his office with his hands on the frame and his eyes on the place the elevator had been. "Check the routing number. They don't match the compliance forms." He heard it again exactly as it had been said. The same flat certainty. Not an accusation, not a question. A statement from a man who knew the difference between a typo and a pattern. How did a cleaning crew member know what compliance forms were? Brett turned to the guards, dismissed them, turned to Gordon. "Ignore it. The man overheard something, maybe. Wanted to seem relevant on his way out." Brett straightened his tie, which had not needed straightening. "Go home, Gordon. Get some sleep. I'll handle the board in the morning." He said it the way he said everything, with the ease of a man who had never once been the person sitting on the wrong side of a closed door. Gordon nodded, slowly. Said nothing. Brett walked down the hallway toward his own office. The sound of his footsteps on the carpet was soft and then gone. Gordon stood in his doorway for another moment. Then he went back inside, sat down, looked at the papers in front of him, at the glass of scotch that had been sitting there for 4 hours untouched. He picked up the compliance verification forms, looked at the routing number in the top right corner, then picked up the wire transfer authorization beside it. Found the routing number there. Read the first one again, then the second, then the first. Brett Coulson's office was on the north corner of the same floor. He had chosen it when they built out the executive suite 3 years ago. Gordon had offered him the south-facing one with the better natural light. Brett said he preferred north. The truth was Brett preferred having a view Gordon could not see from his own window. He closed the door, locked it, sat down at his desk. opened the bottom left drawer, underneath the building facilities manual that no one ever looked at, pulled out a personal laptop, slim and silver, not the company machine. He made 2 calls. The first was brief, a number memorized, not stored. Forwards, paused the pending transfer. He listened for 3 seconds, ended the call. The second was slightly longer. He used language that was, if recorded, entirely innocuous. Scheduling changes, document archiving preferences, the language of a careful man. Then he opened the HR portal on his company laptop. He found the employee record for Elroy Webb, maintenance staff, night shift, hired 2015, 9 years of service. No disciplinary actions, no complaints, no incidents until tonight. He typed the termination request. Unauthorized access to a restricted executive floor, potential exposure of confidential financial documents. Immediate dismissal recommended, effective 6 a.m. He reviewed it, submitted it. Then he opened his email and composed a message to Warren Stills, one of 8 board members. A man who had been for the past 2 years Brett's most announcement. Subject line, tomorrow, as planned. 3 sentences, measured, warm, the language of colleagues' lines and on a shared vision. He read it twice, sent it. He leaned back. The office was dark except for the screen glow and the city lights coming through the north-facing window. Chicago, but at midnight, amber and silver, the river below catching pieces of reflected light, holding them for a moment before letting them go. His hands were steady, his heart rate was where it always was. He had spent 2 years building the exit. The routes were set, the timeline was clear. One cleaning crew member saying something cryptic in an elevator doorway changed nothing. The man did not know what he had seen. He had caught a number, he made a guess. Performed a small act of relevance on his way out the door. By 6 a.m. he would not have a badge. By 7 a.m. the board meeting would begin. By 9 a.m. the vote would happen. And by then the shape of this company's leadership would look very different than it did tonight. Brett closed the personal laptop, returned it to the bottom drawer, turned off his lamp. He did not think about Elroy Webb again. Down in the basement, the break room was the size of a large closet with ambitions, plastic table, 4 mismatched chairs, a microwave older than some of the analysts upstairs, a vending machine against the far wall buzzing at a frequency slightly different from the fluorescent light, so together they made an accidental chord that Elroy had never fully tuned out. He sat at the table with his coffee and his book. He was not reading. His hands were flat on the table on either side of the thermos. His eyes were towards the wall, but not seeing it. He was thinking about 4 digits. 4 digits. On every form he had been able to see from the doorway, not random variation. A consistent pattern across multiple documents. A pattern that, to an untrained eye, looked like a series of minor administrative errors. The kind of thing a basic audit might flag, and a compliance officer would investigate, and a CFO would explain away with a story about a system migration or a vendor code update. Reasonable-sounding things that were only reasonable if you did not look at timestamps. Elroy had looked at the timestamps. In the seconds his eyes had moved across those papers, his brain had noted 5 of them. Involuntarily. The way you noticed when a piece of music was slightly off-tempo, even when you were not listening for it. The transfers clustered, not random. They came in patterns of 2 or 3 within short windows, then nothing for several weeks, then another cluster. That was not data entry error. That was someone who understood how internal audit cycles worked. Someone who knew when the watchers were watching and when they had moved on. He reached into the chest pocket of his coveralls, not for the book, for the other thing. A small notebook, dark brown cover, worn at the corners. The kind that cost $2 at any drugstore and lasted years if you were careful with it. He had been careful with it. He opened it to the first page, dated February 14th, 9 months ago. He had started it the way you started things you were not entirely certain about. Not with conviction, just with the feeling that you were seeing something and that if you did not write it down, you would one day wish you had. February 14th, BC. Personal laptop brought in underarm, south elevator, 10 to 22p. Not the company bag, the other one. February 28th, shredder running in B. C's office, 11:15 meme. Not end of month, no operational reason evident. March 9th, phone call from BC's office, 40p meme. Window cracked an inch. Voice also audible from Hall, not catch the number. Tone directive, one-sided short. And so March. April, May, into summer. 17 entries now. Dates, times, specific behaviors that were each individually explainable and together something else entirely. He was not a detective. He was a man who had spent his career reading the difference between what numbers said and what was actually happening. 9 years of cleaning offices had taught him that buildings, like ledgers, told you the truth if you paid attention to the parts other people dismissed as background. The question he had been sitting with for 9 months was not whether something was wrong. He had stopped wondering about that around month 4. The question was when the right person would be desperate enough to listen to the wrong person. He closed the notebook, put it back in his pocket. He poured the rest of his coffee, which had gone cold, into the small sink in the corner, rinsed his thermos, stood in the doorway of the break room for a moment before turning off the light. On the way out, he stopped at his locker, opened it, looked at the photograph, himself in the charcoal suit, shaking hands, so certain of where he was headed. Ruth had taken that photograph. She had come to the office that day specifically to take it. She had said, "I want something to show people, so they know you were always this." He had thought about those words for 10 years. He still was not sure what they meant exactly, but he thought about them most on nights like this one, when he had done something that was not nothing and that no one in the building above him would attribute to him. And when the question of who you actually were, when no one was looking, felt like the most important question available. He closed the locker, walked down the concrete hallway, through the gray metal door, out into the October night. The bus would not come for 14 minutes. He stood at the stop. A cab went by. A delivery truck. 2 women sharing an umbrella even though it was not raining, walking fast and laughing at something on a phone screen. The city moved the way it always moved. Like the night was not a pause, but a different kind of motion. Like everything was still going somewhere, even at midday. He thought about Gordon Harp's face in that office. A man sitting in the dark with a full glass, scotch and papers, floor fondue, carrying the specific expression of someone who has just understood that the person they trusted most in the world has been lying to them for a long time. He had seen that expression before. He knew its exact weight. He knew what it cost a person to hold it. And he thought about what Brett Colson's face had done for 1 second when Elroy said what he said in that elevator doorway. The smile had held, the composure had held, but something behind it had moved, something quick and recalculating. An animal registering a sound in the dark and deciding how to respond to it. Brett Colson had heard exactly what Elroy said. He had understood it, and he had understood that Elroy understood it. The bus arrived. Elroy got on, found a seat by the window. The city moved past outside, amber and gray, the same city it always was at this hour on a Tuesday. In 9 years of cleaning that building, he had seen things he would never repeat. He had maintained a discretion that was, in its own quiet way, a form of professionalism that the people upstairs would never have used that word for. He had understood his position. He had understood the rules of the space he occupied. Tonight something had shifted. Not in the building, in him. He had said what he said in that elevator doorway because it was true. Because a man sitting alone in the dark deserved to know the truth about why he was sitting there. Because he had looked at Gordon Harp's face and seen something that had no rank attached to it, and no floor number and no title. Just a purse being lied to by someone he trusted completely. Elroy had been lied to once, by the person he had trusted completely. And he knew the specific weight of that. He knew what it felt like from the inside. And he knew that the earlier you gave someone the right question, the more of their life they had left to do something with the answer. He had given Gordon the question. What happened next belonged to Gordon. But sitting on the 107 bus heading north through Chicago at 12:20 in the morning, Elroy Webb already knew, in the way you knew things before your mind had fully assembled them, that tonight was not finished. And in the chest pocket of his coveralls, pressed against his sternum, the small brown notebook with 9 months of careful observation sat quietly, the way something that has been waiting a long time to matter sits when it finally understands its moment is near. Up on the 32nd floor in the dark of his office, Gordon Harp sat with the 2 documents side by side, the compliance form, the wire transfer for authorization. He read the first routing number, wrote it on the corner of a yellow notepad. He read the second routing number, wrote it beneath the first. He looked at the 2 numbers, 4 digits different. He checked a second pair, 4 digits, the same 4 digits, a third, the same. Gordon's hand went still on the desk. The city glittered outside his window. A plane crossed the sky, its red light slow and patient. He reached for the scotch, picked up the glass, set back down without drinking, checked the routing numbers. Said by a man in a cleaning uniforms who was now presumably on a bus going home somewhere in this city. A man Gordon had worked alongside for 9 years without ever having spoken a single word to before night. A man who had been in Gordon's orbit for 9 years without Gordon, while not once his name. Gordon Harp had built this company from a single deal in 1994. He had negotiated with people who had tried to bury him. He had survived 2008. He had survived a lawsuit his lawyers said was unwinnable. He was not a stupid man. But sitting here at midnight, looking at 2 routing numbers that had been wrong across his 7 transactions over 20 months without anyone catching it, without his compliance team, without his external auditors, without his own CFO, he did not feel like a smart man. He felt like a man who had been staring at the ceiling of his building for 9 years and had never once thought to look at the foundation. He pulled the laptop toward him, opened the internal compliance log, filtered for override events in the past 20 months. His stomach dropped, not because of the number of overrides, because of whose credentials had been used on every single one. He pushed back from his desk slowly. His chair rolled until it touched the window behind him. The glass was cold against the back of his head when he leaned into it. Outside, Chicago went on being Chicago, indifferent, lit. Already moving toward tomorrow, in the way a city that never actually slept moved toward things, which was constantly and without ceremony. Inside, Gordon stared at a screen that was telling him something that could not be unknown once he had finished reading it. And somewhere in this building, or on a bus heading north, or in a basement locker room in front of a photograph he looked at every night, the only person who had been paying attention was already gone. 2. The service elevator opened on the basement level with its usual mechanical reluctance. Slow, considered. Like even the machinery down here had learned, there was no point hurrying. Gordon Harp stepped out. He stood in the concrete hallway and looked at it. Really looked at it, maybe for the first time. The flickering light above the service entrance, the gray walls, the smell of industrial cleaner and old coffee sitting on top of something so older, the smell of a space that had never been designed for anyone to linger in and had absorbed that fact into its walls over the years. He had owned this building for 11 years. He had never been in this hallway. He found the break room at the end of the corridor. Door open, light on, that tired yellow fluorescent hum. The vending machine against the far wall adding its own low note to it. Together they made a chord nobody had ever written music in. The kind of sound you stopped hearing after the first 5 minutes, and then heard again every time you thought about something that mattered. Elroy Webb was sitting at the plastic table, coffee thermos in front of him. The Benjamin Graham book beside it, closed. He was not reading. He was sitting the way people sat with familiar things when their mind was working somewhere else entirely. He looked up when Gordon stepped in. Neither of them spoke. Gordon looked at the room, at the 2 mismatched chairs, at the vending machine with its yellowed price labels, at the table with its surface worn down in the center from years of elbows and coffee cups, and the particular weight of people sitting in a place, say a catch they has not chosen and making the best of it. He pulled out the chair across from Elroy and sat down. The plastic creaked under him. He was still in his suit from this morning, still wearing the tie he had loosened at midnight and never fixed. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had been having an expensive crisis in expensive rooms and had now ended up in a basement at 2 in the morning because the only person who had said anything useful tonight was down here. Elroy did not say anything, did not offer coffee, did not perform welcome. Just waited, the way someone waited who understood that the person across from them needed to find their own way into the conversation. You were right, Gordon said. He set it to the table first, then looked up. The routing numbers, 17 transactions, every compliance override traced to the same login credentials, the same time window. He stopped. Brett's office, Brett's credentials, 10 p.m. to midnight. 4 years of it. Elroy said nothing. How did you know? Not accusatory, just a man who needed to understand the shape of what had happened to him. Elroy looked at him for a moment, the kind of look that was deciding something, not whether to tell the truth, where to begin it. He began at the beginning, not the beginning of tonight, the beginning of who he was, Webb and Associates had opened its doors in January 2001. Elroy had spent the 5 years before that building toward it methodically. Staff accountant at a mid-size firm in the Loop after his MBA from Howard, senior associate in 3 years, manager in 2 more. Then left to build his own practice with a man named Carl Duvain, who had been his closest friend since graduate school, and who had, as it turns out, housed 2 things inside the same person that Elroy had never understood were living there together: a talent for numbers and a talent for deception. By 2006, the firm had 22 clients. By 2007, 38. Real growth, real money. Ella Tabenroy had been talking to a broker about office space on Wacker Drive, 15th floor, the kind of address that told clients something before they walked through the door. Then 2008 arrived. The market did not just fall, it dissolved. Things people had believed were solid turned out to have been liquid all along, and the liquidity ran in every direction at once, and nobody could get ahead of it. Elroy had managed the firm through the first quarter of 2009, but barely, but managed. And then Carl Duvain's disappeared, not literally. Carl was still physically present, still answering his phone, still, for 2 weeks, sitting across from Elroy at the conference table they had shared for 8 years. But the money was gone. $340,000 client retainer funds, held in trust, moved over 11 months through transactions so incremental that the monthly reconciliations had looked clean. Every individual entry small enough to attribute to operational variance. Together, they had hollowed out the firm's operating accounts while Elroy had been watching the market and thinking that was the problem. It was not the problem. The problem was the person he trusted most had been running something else inside the firm they built together, and Elroy had not seen it. Not once, not a flicker of it. That was the thing that had stayed with him longer than the money, longer than the bankruptcy proceedings, longer than the clients calling about funds the firm could no longer return. Not that Carl had stolen from him, that Elroy had been the one who was supposed to see it. 18 years of reading financial documents for a living. 18 years of finding the thing that was wrong. And he had not seen it in his own house. He told Gordon this. Not the full texture of it. Not the sleeplessness that had followed him for 2 years, or the particular quality of shame that came from understanding your own blind spot only after it had already cost you everything. Just the structure, the shape of what had happened. Gordon listened without speaking. Then Elroy told him about Ruth. He kept it brief. Ruth was not a story for this room, for this hour, for a man who had not yet earned the full weight of her. He said only that she had been sick beginning in 2013. That treatment required insurance, that the cleaning job provided it. That was the factual reason. The reason he could hand across a table at 2 in the morning to a man he had spoken to for the first time 3 hours ago. The other reason that sitting in an apartment where Ruth's presence lived in every surface and every angle of light at certain times of day was its own kind of slow drowning he kept. So you took this job, Gordon said. I took this job and stayed 9 years. Elroy looked at his hands on the table. Didn't know how to leave. A silent... Gordon looked at his own hands. I've walked past you, he said, in the elevator lobby, in the hallway. 9 years. Yes, I don't remember your face. No, Elroy said, you wouldn't. Not as accusation, said the way you noted a fact about weather. A thing that was true about the world and did not require either of them to perform surprise about it. Gordon absorbed that. Then Elroy reached into his coverall pocket and set the brown notebook on the table between them. Gordon picked it up, opened to the first page. Read the first entry. February 14th, a personal laptop. The time, the detail about the bag, turned pages, slowly at first. Then with more urgency, the urgency of a man reading something that was rewriting his understanding of his own building as he went. 9 months. 17 entries. Behaviors that were each individually explainable and collectively a portrait. You've been watching him, Gordon said. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. Gordon looked up. How long before you knew it was real? I didn't know anything was real. I observed things that didn't fit the normal pattern of that floor at those hours. That's different from knowing. Elroy paused. When did I start believing it was something? March 9th, the phone call. I was cleaning the hallway outside his office. The window was cracked an inch. He did that sometimes when the air recycled badly. I heard his voice through it, not the words. Just the tone. The tone. I've been in enough professional conversations to know the difference between a man discussing something and a man directing something. He was directing. Short sentences, no back and forth. The other person on that call was receiving instruction, not participating in a conversation. Gordon set the notebook down. That's still not evidence. No, that's why I kept going. Elroy nodded at the notebook. I wasn't building a case, I was building a picture, and by month 4, the picture started looking like something specific. Gordon was quiet for a moment, looking at the notebook. Then he said the thing Elroy had been expecting him to say since he walked through the door. Why didn't you say something sooner? The question sat in the room between them. Elroy did not answer immediately. He let it sit. Let Gordon hear it back in his own ears for a moment. Let the man feel the full shape of what he was actually asking. Then he said simply, who was I going to tell? Gordon started to answer. Don't answer it yet, Elroy said. Quiet, not cutting him off, making room for honesty. Think about the actual answer. Think about what happens in the first 30 seconds after I walk up to anyone in that building and say I think your COO is stealing from you. Gordon was silent. The first thing that happens, Elroy said, is someone asks what my job title is, and everything I say after that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't land. It gets filtered through what I'm wearing and where I sleep at night and what floor I'm authorized to be on. He picked up his thermos, turned it in his hands. I needed someone who had enough at stake that they couldn't afford to filter it. Tonight you have exactly that much at stake. Gordon looked at him for a long time. That's a cold way to put it, he said. It's an accurate way to put it, Elroy said. You can be offended by it, or you can use the next 4 hours. What? Gordon looked at his watch. 2:34 a.m. board meeting at 7, 4.5 hours. What do you need, he said. A forensic accountant I trust with access to your backup compliance server, not the main one. The backup. The one the subcontractor installed in 2016. Gordon blinked. How do you know about a backup server? I cleaned the 14th floor every night for 3 weeks while the installation crew was working up there. They worked with the door open. They talked loud. I listened. Elroy picked up his phone. The accountant's name is Audra Fleming. She's independent, one of the best forensic CPAs in Illinois. I'm going to call her now. Gordon looked at his watch again. It's 2:30 in the morning. Yes, Elroy said, and dialed. Audra Fleming picked up on the 3rd ring, not groggy, alert. The particular alertness of someone who had learned over many years to answer Cecius calls, already present, already adjusting to whatever was on the other side. Elroy, Audra, I need your help. A pause, short but not nothing. What kind? Forensic for authorizations and compliance overrides. I need preliminary findings before 7 a.m. Another pause, longer. Elroy. Her voice dropped half a register, not softer, more deliberate. I cannot do this. Audra, no. The word came out clean. No apology coding it. No performance around it. Just the word and what it meant. I told you when I came back from the review board. What happened in 2019 cost me 14 months, 3 major clients. A year of my life I am not getting back. I stood on the right side of something and the right side nearly put me under. I know. Then you know why I'm saying this. I do, Elroy said. I'm still asking. Silence on the line. Long enough that a person who did not know Audra well would have assumed she had ended the call. Tell me what it is, she said finally. The actual situation, he told her. The routing numbers, the compliance overrides, the timestamp clusters, the terminal location, the 9 months in the notebook. He told her about Brett Colson. Not with emotion. With the same flat structural precision he would have used to brief a client on a discrepancy report. What the data pattern looked like. What it implied about the mechanism being used. What kind of access level would be required to sustain it across 4 years. Audra listened without interrupting once. When he finished, she said, how big? Initial audit suggests 48 million. I think it's more. How long? 20 months visibles could be significantly longer with access to the backup server. Another beat. Who did he put it on? Elroy paused. Junior analyst. 27 years old, named Deja Simmons. He heard something change in Audra's breathing, just slightly. She's been terminated 4 months ago. No investigation. No due process. COO's word, nothing else. The line went quiet. He did not fill it. He had made a decision 3 hours ago before any of this began, before Gordon had come downstairs, before the notebook had come out of his pocket. He had left something at Audra's door on his way into the building tonight. Not evidence, not financial documents. Just a manila envelope with Deja Simmons's employee file inside. A photograph from her company ID. Her home address as of her termination, which his own careful attention to the building's internal mail system had given him 4 months ago when the certified letter went out, and a small piece of paper, Elroy's handwriting, that said, "She's been driving overnight delivery routes to cover rent. 4 months now. She's 27 years old." He did not tell Audra he had left it. He did not need to. "Send me access to the backup server," Audra said. "I'll need Mr. Harp to authorize it directly. Not through any other channel in that building. Gordon is sitting across the table from me." A beat that was not quite surprise is not quite not surprise. "Of course he is," she said. "I need 2 hours. Keep everyone away from the primary server logs until I tell I'm done." Her voice shifted, not softer, more precise. If there are gaps in the chain, if this man walks out of that boardroom tomorrow with any room to move, I need the FBI holding this, not me alone. I have a contact there. Then use him. I'll call you when I have a number." She hung up. Elroy set his phone on the table, looked at Gordon. "She's in. I need you to authorize her access to the backup server. There should be a secondary admin portal the subcontractor built with a separate login structure, not connected to your main IT infrastructure. I'd have to find the original documentation. 14th floor, the server room, northeast corner filing cabinet against the wall. There's a folder behind the HVAC operations manual. Blue folder. I've dusted that cabinet for 9 years. Gordon stared at him. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket out of pure reflex, and left the room. Elroy sat alone. He refilled his thermos from the coffee maker in the corner. Fresh pot. He had put it on 20 minutes ago out of habit. The way you did things you had done every night for 9 years without having to decide to do them. He sat back down, opened the Benjamin Graham book. Read 4 pages. Not because he could fully concentrate. Because the rhythm of the words was something to hold on to while the rest of the night moved around him. He thought about Deja Simmons, not abstractly. Specifically, the photograph in the envelope he had left at Audra's door. 27 years old, the first in her family to hold a finance degree. 14 months of building something at Harp Group, and then one afternoon, a man with a corner office, perfect suits, had signed a piece of paper, and everything she had been building stopped. He knew what it felt like when everything stopped. He knew the specific quality of the silence that followed. The way days had a different texture when the thing you had been working toward was no longer there to organize them around. He had not known Deja Simmons. They had never spoken. She had not known he existed, which was the point, which was the thing that had made what he was doing possible, and which was also the thing that had made it necessary. You could only see certain things from where he stood, and he had been standing there long enough to see all of them. Gordon came back with the folder. He also came back something on his face that had not been there when he left. The look of a man who had been walking through his own building in the middle of the night, opening filing cabinets never opened, reading documentation for systems he had never thought to ask about, and arriving at a slow and unavoidable understanding of the size of what he did not know about the place he owned. He read Elroy the server credentials. Elroy emailed them to Audra. Then Gordon's phone buzzed on the table between them. He looked at the screen. His face changed, not gradually, all at once, Brett. Just triggered a remote wipe on 3 subsidiary servers. He turned the screen toward Elroy. An automated security alert sent to the CEO and IT director for any remote access event outside business hours. These servers contain the transaction detail logs from the past 2 years. Elroy looked at the alert. 3 servers. The wipe had initiated 6 minutes ago, 40% complete according to the progress indicator, 4 minutes. The evidence?
Gordon started.
Is on the backup server, Elroy said, not the primary. The backup runs on a separate cycle. Brett doesn't know it exists because the documentation was filed in a cabinet he never had reason to open. How certain are you? I'm certain about the blue folder in the 14th floor filing cabinet. Elroy was already picking up his phone. I'm about to find out about the rest. He called Audra. 1 ring. Tell me you have backup access before those servers went down, she said. No greeting. Are you in? I've been in for 20 minutes. A pause that was actually just a breath between sentences. Elroy. This is not 48 million. Something settled in his chest, not relief exactly. The feeling of a thing you suspected being confirmed, which was different. How much? I need another 30 minutes to close the full picture. But I'm looking at a 4-year window, not 20 months. The early transactions are buried inside operational expense categories. Incredibly small amounts early on. He built the system slowly, tested it, then scaled it once he understood it was holding. Her voice was doing what it did when she found something genuinely worth her full attention. It got quieter and more exact at the same time. The routing number discrepancy is consistent across every transaction I can see. Different destination accounts, but the same structural signature. One person, one system. 4 years of trusting it. He started in year 3 of his tenure as co, Elroy said. That fits exactly what I'm looking at. A brief silence. 30 minutes. Don't let anyone touch anything. She was gone. Elroy set his phone down, looked at Gordon. Gordon was sitting very still. The kind of still that was not calm, but was what a person looked like when they were using all available energy to hold themselves together while something large finished arriving. 4 years, he said. Apparently. He was at my daughter's graduation. Gordon said it to the table. He gave a toast at 50th birthday. He stopped. He stood up front of everyone I knew and talked about what it meant to work alongside someone you truly trusted. The word trusted landed and sat there, and did not need anything added to it. Elroy did not say anything, because there was nothing to say to that which would have been more honest than the silence. Some things needed the room of their own weight, and were not helped by being spoken around. After a moment, Gordon said, "The FBI. I need to make a call," Elroy said. He had sent the first package 4 weeks ago, not to anyone he knew, through the FBI's online tip portal for financial crimes. Anonymous submission. 3 pages from the notebook, the most clearly corroborating entries, plus a 2-page memo he had written, laying out the pattern of language a forensics examiner would recognize as structured and specific rather than speculative. He had not known if it would go anywhere. Anonymous tips were a long shot. He understood that. But he had been sitting with the notebook for 7 sisses and had begun to understand that the longer he held what he knew, the larger the scale of what Brett was doing would grow. Every week he waited was another cluster of transfers. Another amount moved. Another piece of something being built that would be that much harder to dismantle. A week after the submission, a call had come from a number he did not recognize. Agent Dwight Reese, Financial Crimes Unit, FBI, Chicago. He had said 3 things. The tip had been received and reviewed. The material was credible enough to open a preliminary inquiry. If the source wanted to speak further, he was available. Elroy had called back the next day. They had spoken for 40 minutes. He had given Reese the full pattern, not the notebook itself, not the specific mechanism of the override system, but enough. For enough to understand what he was looking at and why it was real, and not the grievance of a disgruntled employee. Reese had said, "If you get me documentation tying the overrides to a specific individual with timestamp and access log verification, I can move within 24 hours of receiving it." Elroy had said, "Understood." That had been 3 weeks ago. Tonight he had the documentation. He dialed. Reese picked up on the second ring, alert, already oriented. The quality of a man who had been waiting, not sleeping. "Mr. Webb, Agent Reese, my forensic contact is pulling the full package together now. You'll have everything by 5 a.m. access logs, transaction records, compliance override documentation, complete chain of custody." A pause. The sound of a man doing math on what he was being asked to do before dawn on a Wednesday. "If the documentation is as complete as you're telling me," Reese said, "I can have a team in position by 6:30, but I need it airtight. Every element. The chain cannot have gaps. Audra Fleming is building it. A beat. I know her work. Then you know it'll hold. 5 a.m., Reese said. "Don't be late with it." The call ended. "Elroy," I said, his phone down. Gordon was watching him. "You called the FBI," Gordon said. "Before tonight. I sent an anonymous tip 4 weeks ago. I spoke to Agent Reese 3 weeks ago." Elroy met his eyes. "I didn't have enough then to give him what he needed to move. Tonight I do." Gordon was quiet for a moment, working through the shape of it. "You've been preparing for this," he said. Not an accusation, something astonishment and something that did not have a simple name. "I was preparing in case a night like tonight became possible," Elroy said. "I did not know it would be tonight. I did not know you would be the one to stay in your office past 11. Gordon looked at the table, then back at Elroy. "Why?" he said. "Not the FBI tip and not notebook. Just why any of it?" He paused. "You don't owe this company anything. You don't owe me anything. I didn't know your name before tonight." Elroy was quiet for a moment. He thought about how to answer that honestly. My former partner stole from people who had trusted us both, he said. Clients who had given us their books because they believed we were the people to protect them. I spent a long time after that thinking about what I should have seen. What the right thing to have done would have been if I had seen it. He looked at the notebook on the table between them. I got a chance to do it right this time. That's the whole answer. Gordon looked at him. That's a small thing, he said. No, Elroy agreed. It isn't. Another silence, different from the earlier ones, not weighted with crisis. Just two people sitting with something real. I owe you an apology, Gordon said. Elroy waited. Not just for tonight, for 9 years of walking past you and not knowing your name. He said it plainly, without dressing it up in language that would have made it easier to say. That's not a thing I can fix, but I want to say it out loud. Elroy looked at him. You can make it mean something going forward, he said. Or not. That part is yours. Gordon nodded, slowly, like to signifying things that was fair and knowing it was fair. 409 AM Audra called. Elroy put her on speaker, set the phone in the center of the table. Gordon sat still and listened. She had been inside the backup server data for 90 minutes. She had a complete picture now, and her voice carried the particular quality it carried when she had found everything she needed and had ascended into something that would hold up anywhere it needed to hold up. Total confirmed figure is $71,240,000, she said. 4 years and 3 months of transactions. The early amounts are very small, consistent with someone testing the system rather than exploiting it. He escalated steadily over time as the system held without triggering review. Gordon closed his eyes for a moment. Opened them. 7 shell companies, Adra continued. All domestic, Delaware and Wyoming registrations with nominee directors. The funds moved through a layered series of domestic wire transfers, ending in 3 private accounts held under names I believe are aliases. FBI will need subpoena authority to pull the full account records. But the transaction logs are complete and the chain's proper group accounts those destinations is unbroken. Every step documented. Gordon was not moving. There's something else, Audra said. Her voice shifted slightly, not in volume but in weight. The Deja Simmons termination was filed the same week Brett accelerated his transfer schedule. There's a compliance override event 6 days before she was let go. It's the first single transaction in the entire 4-year dataset. He was moving fast that week. I think he was preparing an exit strategy, and when something gave him reasons to pause, he needed a firewall. He used her. The room held that. Elroy looked at the table. A 27-year-old woman driving overnight delivery routes to pay rent had been a strategic tool. A piece on a board that a man in a charcoal suit had moved to protect himself while continuing to do what he had been doing for 4 years. She had not known, she could not have known. Send everything to me and to Agent Dwight Reese at FBI Chicago, Elroy said. He read Reese's secure email address from his phone. Full package, delivered by 4:40, Audra said. Then Elroy. Yes, he filed your termination tonight, effective 6 a.m. Elroy glanced at Gordon. Gordon's expression had hardened in the way of a man who had just located the boundary of what he was willing to allow. That's reversed as of right now, Gordon said. Loud enough for the phone. I'll have it in the system in the next 10 minutes. Then I'll see you both at 7, Audra said. The call ended. Gordon picked up his phone immediately, opened the HR portal, reversed the termination, set down his phone. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The vending machine buzzed. The light hummed. Outside the service entrance, the city was in the particular stillness of the hours between 4 and 5 a.m. when even Chicago went briefly quiet, not asleep, but resting between the end of the night shift and the beginning of the morning one. I need to ask you something, Gordon said. Elroy waited. Deja Simmons. He said her name with care, like a man handling something he had already broken once and was determined not to break again. What do you know about where she is right now? She lost her apartment in July, Elroy said. She's been driving for a delivery service to cover a rented room. She applied for 4 positions in finance over the past 3 months. Did not get past a first interview in any of them. He paused. Her name is in the industry now. Brett made sure of that when he filed the termination the way he did. Gordon looked at the table. I signed off on that termination, he said. Yes, without asking a single question. Without asking a single question. Gordon did not try to soften it or explain it. He let it stand as exactly what it was. Which was, Elroy thought, the most useful thing Gordon done since he walked through the door of the break room 2 hours ago. She gets her job back, Gordon said. Everything owed to her from the day she was let go. Full back pay. That's the minimum, Elroy said. What else? What you say publicly. Not the internal memo. Not the HR remediation paperwork. Elroy looked at him steadily. What you say out loud, with your name attached to it, in front of people who can hear it. That matters more than the pay. Gordon absorbed that. I understand, he said. Do you? Gordon held his gaze. I think I'm just beginning to understand a lot of things I should have understood before tonight. I know that's not enough, but it's what's true. Elroy considered that for a moment. It's enough to start with, he said, depending on what comes after it. 5:04 a.m. Gordon stood, dibbled, straightened his tie. Automatic. The reflex of a man whose professional assets lived in his hands, even when everything else was somewhere far from normal. I need to get ready, he said. I'll have a visitor badge waiting at the front desk by 6. Elroy looked at him. Front desk, Gordon said. Front entrance. You come in through the front. A moment passed between them. Gordon, you come in through the front, Gordon said again. Simple, not negotiable, not a gesture. Just the plainest correction he could make to the plainest thing that needed correcting. He picked up the blue folder from the table, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, turned back. The photograph in your locker, he said. I saw it when I came in. The one in the gray suit. Elroy waited. You looked like a man who knew exactly where he was going. Elroy was quiet for a moment. I knew how to get somewhere, he said. I was wrong about where, but the knowing how, that part was true. Gordon looked at him for one more moment, then walked out into the hallway and was gone. His footsteps on the concrete moved away, and then there was just the hum and the buzz and the stillness of a space that had been holding things quietly for a long time. Elroy stayed at the table. He refilled his coffee, sat back down, did not open the book this time, the thought about Ruth, not the hospital, not the last months. The earlier part. The part where she would come into his home office late at night and find him still at his desk and a cup of tea beside the keyboard, without asking if he wanted it, and stand there for a moment. Just be there. The specific warmth of another person choosing to stay near you when they had no obligation to. He had not told Gordon about the scholarship yet. That was for later, after. Right now there was a board meeting at 7 o'clock, and a man 32 floors above him who had spent the last 2 hours learning to look at his building differently. And somewhere on the other side of this city, there was a 27-year-old woman who had been driving his overnight routes for 4 months, and did not yet know that the morning coming toward her was a different kind of morning. He sat in the basement break room of the building he had cleaned for 9 years. The light hummed. The machine buzzed. The city outside the concrete moved through the last quiet hour before it woke up fully and became itself again. Elroy Webb sat with his coffee and his thoughts and the small brown notebook that had spent 9 months becoming necessary. He had waited this long. He could wait until 6, 5:31 a.m. Chicago was not awake yet, but it was thinking about it. That hour before dawn when the city existed in 2 states at once, the night shift still moving through it. The day shift not yet started. Delivery trucks on the expressway. A diner on Wabash with its lights on and 3 people inside. The L running empty cars through empty stations, the sound of it traveling farther than it would in 2 hours when the city's noise would swallow it whole. Elroy Webb stood at the service entrance of Caldwell Financial Tower. His hand was on the gray metal door. The same door he had come through for 9 years, the same badge scanner with the same beep, the same flickering light above it that nobody had fixed and that Elroy had stopped expecting anyone to fix a long time ago. He stood there for a moment. Just stood. Then he turned around. He walked back around the building, down the side street, around the corner onto LaSalle, to the front. The revolving door was locked after hours, but the side entrance with the badge reader was operational. Gordon had texted him at 4:50 a.m. Badges is at the front desk. Maurice is on until 6. He knows you're coming. Elroy walked to the side door, pressed the buzzer. Maurice appeared from the security desk. He moved the way he always moved, without hurry, with the particular dignity of someone who had worked nights long enough to understand that the night rewarded patience, and that patience was its own form of competence. He looked at Elroy through the glass for just a moment, then buzzed the door open. Mr. Webb, he said, badge is right here. He held out the visitor credential without ceremony. No raised ismbrow, no particular weight placed on anything. Just a man at a desk doing his job with the same care he brought to every hour of every shift. Elroy took the badge, clipped it to his chest pocket. "Thank you, Maurice." "Yes, sir." Elroy crossed the marble lobby. His shoes made the same sound on the marble they always made, because they were the same shoes. Polished this morning before he left his apartment for the first time in months with real attention, the way you paid attention to something you wanted to do right. But the sound felt different, not because of the shoes, because of which door for the elevator. Not the service bank on the far left with its slow mechanical rise and its cargo smell. The main passenger elevators. Brushed steel doors, the amber floor display above. The doors opened. He stepped in, pressed 32. The doors closed, and the car rose, and Elroy stood in it alone, and did not think about anything in particular. Just let the building carry him up. The building had been carrying people up for 11 years. Executive and maintenance and legal and all the invisible work that kept the visible work possible. He thought about what he was about to walk into. He thought about being ready. He was ready. The doors opened on 32. The floor was already alive in the way floors came alive when something was happening that mattered. Gordon's assistant Paula had been called in early and was moving through the corridor with the controlled efficiency of someone who had been told enough to understand that today was serious without being told enough to understand how serious. Water glasses being arranged on the boardroom table. A coffee station being set up outside the main conference room. The small choreography of a space preparing itself for something significant. Gordon was in his office. Door open, on a call. He looked up when Elroy appeared in the doorway. Their eyes met, and Gordon gave a single nod. Composed, present. The version of Gordon Harp that had built a company from nothing, that had survived things that should have finished him, that had been sitting in a basement break room 2 hours ago, learning to see his own building differently, and had now arrived on the other side of that education. Legal counsel was already in the boardroom. Claire Attridge, 50s, gray suit. Reading glasses pushed up on her nose, yellow legal pad already half covered in handwriting, the handwriting of someone who processed information by putting it on paper immediately and sorted it later. She looked up when Elroy came in and assessed him with the efficient completeness of someone who assessed everything and gave nothing away in the assessing. Audra Fleming was setting up her laptop at the far end of the table. She had been here before Elroy. She would have come at 5 a.m. if she could have gotten in at 5 a.m. She looked up when he entered and held his gaze for a moment, the look of someone who had been through a long night on their end too, and had come out the other side with everything they needed. The look that meant, we're ready. Against the far wall, not sitting, not talking to anyone, stood a man in a dark blue suit with a government ID clipped to his breast pocket. Agent Dwight Reese, 46 years old, broad through the shoulders. The stillness of someone who had spent a career in rooms where things were about to happen and had learned to conserve everything until the moment that required it. He glanced at Elroy when Elroy entered. Elroy nodded once. Reese did not nod back. He did not need to. The acknowledgement was already established between them and did not require performance in a room full of people who did not yet know its history. 2 other agents were somewhere in the building. Elroy did not know exactly where. That was deliberate and correct. The board members arrived between 6:15 and 6:40. 8 of them, dark suits, faces that had been doing the work of composure since they got the call last night and had been doing it with varying degrees of success. 3 of them were still on their phones as they walked in and ended their calls when they sat down without being asked. The way people ended calls when they walked into rooms that told them immediately the calls could wait. None of them were making small talk. They understood enough to know that something beyond the scheduled crisis had developed. They did not yet know the shape of it. Warren Stills arrived at 6:38. He was the 6th board member through the door. He scanned the room the way people scanned rooms when they were looking for a specific person to orient themselves to. When his eyes found Gordon, something in his expression settled. When his eyes continued around the table and found Audra's laptop open, and found Reese standing against the wall with a government ID visible at his chest, something in his expression did something else. He was 62 years old and had been on corporate board bonds, long enough to know that a man in a dark suit with federal identification standing against the walls at 7 a.m. board meeting was not a routine presence. He sat down, said nothing. His hands went flat on the table in front of him and stayed there. Elroy took a seat on the right side of the table, not at the head, not at the far end. In the middle, where he could see the full room and the full room could see him. He set the folder Audra had prepared in front of him, folded his hands on top of it. He did not look out of place. He sat the way he had sat in rooms like this one 20 years ago, when he had known exactly who he was and why he was there, and what his presence at the table meant. Some things the body remembered, even when circumstances had spent years trying to make it forget. 6:58. Brett Colson walked into the boardroom, dark brown leather folder under his charcoal suit today, burgundy tie sitting exactly where burgundy tie should sit. He was as composed as Elroy had ever seen him across 9 years of observation, which meant completely, which was the point, which was what a man who'd been running something for 4 years and trusted his own system looked like. When he walked into a room he believed he still controlled. He moved through the entry with the ease of someone who owned the floor and had walked on it that way for a decade. Shook 2 hands, poured himself coffee at the side station, found his usual chair on the right side of the table, second from the head, and sat down before he had fully looked at who else was in the room. He opened his folder. Then he looked up, and he saw Elroy Webb sitting directly across the table from him. The process of recognition happened in stages visible only to someone watching for them, which Elroy was. The initial glance registered a man in a navy suit he did not immediately place. Then the features resolved, and then the situational logic arrived, the fact that this specific man was sitting at this specific table in this specific room. And the logic of it hit Brett's composure the way a small stone hits still water. The coffee cup stopped, halfway to his mouth, held there for 2 full seconds. Then Brett set it down very carefully. The care itself was information. A composed man setting down a cup with that much deliberateness was a man using composure as a tool rather than experiencing it as a state. Gordon. His voice was smooth, professionally smooth, the kind of smooth that was a practiced surface over whatever was actually happening underneath. I didn't realize we'd have additional guests this morning. We have everything we need, Gordon said. Brett looked around the table again. His eyes moved across Audra's laptop, across the printed document stacked beside it, across Reese, standing against the wall. His eyes did not stop on any of these things long enough to show they had registered them. But they had registered them. Elroy could see the registration happening beneath the surface of the look. "Should we get started?" Brett said, picking up the folder in front of him. Orienting toward the version of this meeting he had prepared for, the version where he was still the one with the plan. "Gordon, do you want to open or should I take it?" "I'll take it," Gordon said. He stood. His room settled. He looked around the table at 8 board members who had come expecting to discuss crisis management, investor confidence, the findings of an internal audit that pointed toward a junior analyst, no longer employed by the company. He looked at them the way a man looked at people he owed a truth to and had waited too long to give it. "What you're about to hear is different from what you were told this meeting would cover," Gordon said. "The last 12 hours have required a significant revision of what I understood to be true about this company and about the people I trusted to run it with me. I apologize for the hour and for the lack of preparation time. What I can tell you is that what you're going to see this morning is complete and it is accurate, and it changes everything about how we move forward from today." He pressed a button on the conference phone. The screen at the end of the room came alive, a single slide, white background, black text, no decoration, no company logo, no color. Just the facts in the plainest form they could take. Wire transfer authorization, compliance override analysis. Harp Group internal accounts. Fiscal years 2020 through 2024. Brett's coffee cup was on the table in front of him. He did not reach for it again. Gordon walked through it. He was methodical, and he was not emotional, and he had been awake all night and was running on the particular fuel available to people who discover they have been betrayed and choose clarity over collapse. He laid out the routing number discrepancy, the 17 visible transactions in the initial audit, the compliance overrides concentrated in a specific terminal location during a specific time window, the credentials attached to every single override event in the system log. Then he said, Audra Fleming is a forensic CPA with 30 years of independent practice. She's going to walk you through the complete analysis. Audra stood. She was not theatrical. She did not perform certainty because she did not need to perform it. She simply had it. And genuine expertise came through in the particular way it always came through when it was real, which was without decoration, without hedging, without a single syllables spent on anything that was not the work itself. She walked the room through the backup server data, 4 years and 3 months. The early transactions, small buried inside operational categories. The transactions of someone testing a system rather than exploiting it yet. The escalation as the system held up without triggering review. The 7 shell companies, all domestic Delaware and Wyoming registrations. The layered wire transfer structure. The destination accounts. As she put the full timeline on the screen. Put the compliance override log on the screen, with Brett Colson's employee credentials highlighted in each entry. The timestamp cluster visible across 4 years of late Tuesday and Wednesday evenings, always from the same terminal, always in the window between 10 p.m. and midnight when he had believed the floor was empty. The floor had not been empty. The total confirmed figure, Audra said, in the same voice as she had used for every number she had given in the past 2 hours, level and exact, is $71,240,000. The transaction chain is complete and unbroken. The chain of custody for this data is intact and documented. The room was silent, not the polite silence of people waiting for the next speaker, the silence of people absorbing something that had no comfortable place to land. The silence of 8 board members recalibrating everything they thought they understood about the company they had been governing. Brett had not moved during Audra's presentation. He sat with his hands in his lap and his face in the expression of careful professional attention that he had worn in 1,000 meetings over 10 years and that had served him well on all of them. He was still wearing it now, but it had shifted in the way a very good costume shifted under the wrong light. Still recognizable, no longer convincing. These numbers as are being presented without full context, Brett said. His voice was controlled, still finding the professional register, still reaching for the version of this moment he had prepared for. The override system was used for purposes I can fully explain. The shell companies are investment vehicles with a disclosure timeline I intended to bring to the board at the appropriate quarter. He opened his folder, the prepared pages. 3 of them, carefully written, weeks in the making and completely useless now. Gordon, I understand you're under enormous pressure, and I understand why you're looking for answers. But what's happening in this room right now is a rush to judgment based on a data presentation that lacks. There's more, Gordon said. Brett stopped. Gordon looked at Elroy. Elroy opened the folder in front of him. He did not look at Brett. He looked at the room. At the 8 board members and the legal counsel and Audra and Reese standing against the wall. He looked at the room the way you looked at a room you needed to be a exhibit with. He spoke. Not the way someone who needed to prove something spoke. The way someone who had already proved it and was now simply reporting it spoke. Without performance. Without excess. With the kind of precision that was what 18 years of professional accounting had given him, and what 9 months of careful observation had confirmed, and what a lifetime of being the person in the room that other people looked through had prepared him to deliver in exactly this way, at exactly this moment. He laid out the behavioral record from the notebook, dates, times, specific observations. The personal laptop brought in after hours, the off-schedule shredding 3 separate incidents, none of them coinciding with legitimate end of quarter document management period. The phone call in March heard through the cracked window, the one-sided directive quality of it. The USB drives that appeared on Brett's desk on certain evenings and, gone by morning, never logged with the IT department, never appearing in any equipment record. He correlated each observation with the corresponding date in Audra's transaction timeline. Every behavioral anomaly mapped to a cluster of financial activity within days. Every late night in that office corresponded to movement in those accounts. 4 years of it, 1 page at a time. I want to be precise about my qualifications, Elroy said, because the room needed this established before Brett found another angle. I hold CPA certification with 18 years of experience in corporate accounting and audit. I operated an independent accounting firm for 8 years. The analysis Audra Fleming presented this morning I reviewed independently between 2 and 5 a.m., and I can verify its accuracy and its methodology. The conclusions are sound. The board members were looking at him, not past him, not through him, at him. Hobart, 63, 6 years on this board, the one who'd not spoken yet this morning, said, "You work maintenance in this building." "I work the night custodial shift, yes," Elroy said. "That's how I knew where the backup server documentation was filed. That's how I had access to the behavioral patterns of the 32nd floor over 9 months of late evenings when the executive suite was supposed to be empty." He held Hobart's eyes. "And that's how I was able to build the observational record that corroborates every transaction in Audra's analysis." The room held that. Brett's folder was still open in front of him, the 3 prepared pages visible but untouched now. He looked at Elroy with an expression that was the last version of the performance available to him, which was the expression of a man who had been wronged. "He was removed from this floor last night for unauthorized access," Brett said. His voice was climbing slightly, not losing control, adjusting strategy, moving toward the exit he had built for exactly this scenario. "He has a demonstrated grievance against this company and against me personally. He was in this building unsupervised for 9 years and clearly used that access to construct a fabricated narrative targeting a senior executive." He looked around the table, trying to find the faces that would hold. "You are going to take the word of a custodian over the word of a 10-year officer of this company who has dedicated the routing numbers," Elroy said. Simple. 2 words placed in the room like something set down on a table. Brett stopped. "You ran 17 compliance overrides from your terminal," Elroy said, "between 10 p.m. and midnight over 4 years. Each one created a 4-digit discrepancy between the compliance log and the wire transfer authorization. Each one moved money to accounts you controlled. The backup server logged all of it. Audra documented all of it. Agent Reese has all of it." He looked at Brett directly, for the first time since the meeting had begun. "You called me Mop Boy," he said. "Even. No heat in it. No performance of calm. Just a man saying what was true. You had security search me in a hallway at 11 o'clock at night. You filed a termination request at midnight while you were making calls from a phone number you had memorized rather than stored." He paused. "You did those things because you needed me to be nothing. Because if I was nothing, what I had seen for 9 months did not exist." Brett stared at him. "What I saw existed," Elroy said. "It just waited." Something moved across the room. Not dramatic. Just a shift in the air of the place, the specific shift that happened when the last version of a false thing finished collapsing, and what was left was just the true one. Brett looked around the table one more time. Every face was stone, not hostile, not theatrical. Just closed to him in the way faces, close to people when they had heard enough to decide. He looked at Warren Stills, the investment he had tended most carefully for 2 years. Stills was looking at the table in front of him, his hands still flat, his face the careful blankness of a man who understood that his own situation had just changed and was measuring the distance between where he was and where the exit was. There were no allies in this room. There was no version of this moment that belonged to Brett anymore. He stood. He buttoned his jacket, one button, the automatic gesture of a professional preparing to move through a room. He picked up the brown leather folder with the 3 useless pages inside it and tucked it under his Haas arm and walked toward the boardroom door with the stride of a man who tin-taught his posture alone to rewrite what had just happened. He reached for the door handle. The door opened before he touched it. Brett's hand was still raised, still reaching for a handle that was no longer there, when Agent Reese stepped through from the hallway with 2 agents behind him, both in dark suits. Both with the same quality of deliberate economy that Reese carried, the quality of people who had been standing in the hallway for 40 minutes waiting for this exact moment, and had used those 40 minutes to be completely still. Reese looked at Brett. Brett Colson. Brett's hand was still in the air. He looked at the agents, looked back at the room, at Gordon, at the board members, at Warren Stills, who had gone the particular shade of pale that arrived when a person understood that their own calculation had failed. At Elroy. He started. Stop. This is a setup. The janitor constructed this. He had 9 years of unsupervised access to this building, and he used it to frame a man he resented because nobody answered him. Not one person at that table opened their mouth. 8 board members, legal counsel, Audra Fleming, agent Reese, all of them silent, all of them watching. The silence of people who had heard enough and were now simply waiting for the next part to happen. Gordon looked at Brett. He had known this man for 10 years. He had trusted this man with everything. He had listened to this man give a toast at his birthday and talk about what it meant to work alongside someone you truly trusted. And he had believed every word of it because he had wanted to believe it, because belief was easier than the question beneath it. Gordon looked at Brett now the way you looked at someone when you had finally seen the thing that was always there, and were still in the early moments of understanding what it meant to have not seen it sooner. He did not say a word, not one word, and that silence said everything that needed to be said between them, which was that 10 years of trust had ended in a basement break room at 2 in the morning with a notebook and a routing number. And that the only person who had been paying attention was someone Gordon had walked past without looking for 9 years. Reese stepped forward. "You're under arrest. Wire fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of it moved quickly, the way these things moved quickly, once they began, the practiced efficiency of people who had done this before, and knew that speed was a form of dignity for everyone present. The handcuffs made the sound they always made, small, metallic. A sound that was not large, but that changed the shape of everything in the room when it happened. Brett tried once more. He turned his head to the board. His voice had lost its professional register entirely now. It was thinner, higher. The voice of a man who had been running something for 4 years on the belief that he was the smartest person in any room he entered, and was now standing in a room that belief had been completely, finally, and publicly disproved. Gordon, 10 years. I want you to think about what 10 years mean. I want you to think about everything I built for this company and tell them. Tell them I was. Nobody answered. The agents walked Brett out. Through the boardroom door, down to the hallway with the thick carpet that had absorbed 10 years of his footsteps, past the glass-walled conference rooms where he had sat at the head of the table for a decade of meetings, past the reception desk where his name was still on the executive directory, into the elevator, down 32 floors. The lobby was quiet at 7:15 in the morning. Maurice at the security desk, awesomable floor. The chandelier light catching the stitch and spreading it across the entry in long amber shapes. The same lobby where Brett had told a security guard to search a man in a cleaning uniform the night before. The same marble that man had mopped 10,000 times. Brett Coulson walked through that lobby in handcuffs, his Italian shoes clicking on their shoes, and reflections splashing across the polished floor in a shape that was distorted and broken and disappearing as he moved toward the glass doors and through them and into the October morning. A dark sedan was at the curb. The agents put him in the back. The door closed. The car pulled into the early traffic on LaSalle Street and was gone. The boardroom exhaled. The vote happened inside 10 minutes. Unanimous. Brett Coulson removed from all positions effective immediately. All corporate access revoked. All accounts frozen. Legal counsel directed to pursue full civil recovery in parallel with the federal prosecution. An independent audit firm to be engaged to review the complete 4-year period. Reese stayed for 20 minutes, speaking quietly with Claire Attridge about procedural timelines, with Gordon about document preservation requirements. He did not make it ceremonial. He did not make it anything other than what it was, which was the beginning of a long and careful legal process that would take its own time and move at its own pace, and that he had been preparing for since a man he had never met had sent him 3 pages of handwritten notes 4 weeks ago. Before he left, he stopped near Elroy. He held out his hand. Elroy shook it. "The tip you sent," Reese said, 4 weeks ago. He threw his gaze for him was this. It was the clearest anonymous submissions I've received in 11 years of this work. Part of it. "I appreciate it," Elroy said. Reese nodded, left. Warren Stills had not moved from his chair during the arrest. He was still sitting with his hands flat on the table and his eyes focused on an illimitable surface that did not contain anything except the fact of what he had done and where it had arrived him. Claire Attridge walked to his end of the table. She said his once, quietly, with the specific gentleness of a professional who was delivering an inevitability to a person who already knew it was coming. Stills nodded, stood slowly. walked out with Claire and did not look at anyone as he went, which was its own kind of accounting. The room emptied gradually. Board members moving into smaller conversations, into their phones, into the particular choreography of people who had witnessed something that required them to immediately begin processing what it meant for the next decision and the one after that. Audra packed her laptop, walked to Elroy on her way out, put her hands on his arm for a moment. "Go home and sleep," she said, in a while. She looked at him the way someone looked at a person they had known for 26 years and understood that in a while meant what it meant, and that pushing was not care. "You did good work tonight," she said. "We did," he said. She left. Gordon found him by the east window. The boardroom opened at one end into the executive corridor, and there was a window at the turn of the hall that faced east toward the lake, though the lake was not visible from here. Just the grid of the city and the morning light coming in at the low, flat angle of late October, hitting the glass of the buildings across LaSalle and making everything briefly, unreasonably clear. "You saved this company," Gordon said. He said it simply. Not as a speech, as a fact that needed to be said out loud so it would be on record between them. "I told you where to look," Elroy said. "You did the rest. That's not. It is." Elroy turned from the window. The call to Audra, the call to Reese, walking into that room and standing there this morning and saying what needed to be said. Those were your choices. Each one, not mine, he paused. I gave you a direction. What you did with it was yours. Gordon Wallen was quiet. "I need to call Deja Simmons." Yes, I don't know what to say to her." "Say the truth," Elroy said, "all of it. Don't make it shorter or softer than it is, because that would make it easier for you to say." She sat with what happened to her for 4 months. You can sit with saying it right for as long as it takes. Gordon looked at him. Then he took out his phone, found Feshare near the window, sat, looked at the number to screen for a moment, dialed. Elroy moved down the hallway to give him space. He stood at a different window, north-facing. The Chicago River below, that dark ribbon of water moving through the middle of the city the way it had moved through it for longer than any building on its banks. Carrying whatever it carried, going where it went. He could hear Gordon's voice down the hall, not the words, just the quality of it. The way it found some lower and less practice than the voice Gordon used in boardrooms. The way it changed when the call connected and changed again when someone on the other end began speaking. Then silence on Gordon's end while the other person spoke. A longer silence. Elroy looked at the river. He thought about Deja Simmons in a parking lot somewhere on the other side of this city. Getting a call from a number she did not recognize at 7 in the morning after a night shift. Answering it, or almost not. And what she heard when she did. He hoped she was somewhere she could sit down. He hoped she let herself cry if she needed to. He hoped Gordon said every word without softening it. Gordon came out of the alcove after a while. His eyes were red at the corners in the way of a man who had held himself together through something that had not been easy to hold together through. He was holding his phone against his chest, the posture of someone who had just set down something heavy and had not yet fully let go of where the weight had been. "She was in her car," Gordon said, "about to start a shift." Elroy nodded. "She cried for a long time," Gordon said. "I let her." "Good." She asked who had fought for her. Gordon looked at Elroy. "I told her someone who understood what it cost to be ignored by people who should have listened. She said to tell that person something." Elroy waited. She said, "Tell him I see him." The words landed quietly. Elroy did not say anything for a moment. "Director of Finance Compliance," Gordon said. "Full back pay from the day of termination. She reports directly to the board, not through any COO or CFO, directly." He paused. "And I'm building out the whistleblower infrastructure she'll need to actually do that job. Independent reporting channels, protected disclosure procedures, real teeth." "That's the right structure," Elroy said. "She said she wants to name the whistleblower protocol after you." Elroy looked at him. "Tell her to name it something that describes what it does, something functional. Not a person. I'll pass that along." Gordon paused. "She might not listen. Then that's her first act of authority in the new role," El said, "which is exactly the right way to start." Gordon almost smiled, the closest thing to a smile available to a man who had been awake all night and had just finished the hardest phone call of his professional life. "There's something I want to offer you," Gordon said. They were walking now, slowly, down the corridor toward the main elevator bank, the floor moving around them. People arriving for the start of a day that would be unlike any recent one and would require things from all of them that they had not been required to give before. A role here: Vice Presidents of Internal Audit, full access to all financial operations. Salary that reflects what you should have been earning. An office. He looked at Elroy. Real standing, in this building, with your name on something that matters. Elroy walked. I've had an office, as he said it. I know what they do to people over time. I'm not talking about offices in general. I'm talking about you specifically. The work you did for 9 months without a title or an office or any authorization whatsoever. Imagine what you could do with all three. I'd do more without the first two, Elroy said. 2 days a week. Consulting basis. I review your internal systems for structural vulnerability. The things automated audits don't, because all systems look for what they've been programmed to see. I train your junior analysts to look for behavioral patterns, not just numerical ones, the things that happen at 10 p.m. and midnight that never appear in any spreadsheet but tell you everything. Gordon nodded slowly. And the rest of your time? That's mine. They reached the elevator bank. Gordon pressed the button. The amber display above counted down toward them. There's something I'd like to ask you for, Elroy said. Gordon looked at him. A scholarship. Howard University, funded through HARP Group, full tuition, accounting or finance, for students who are the first in their families to pursue either field. Elroy kept his eyes on the elevator doors. It carries a name, of course, Gordon said. What name? Ruth Webb. A moment. Gordon held Elroy's gaze. He said the name back. Ruth Webb. With the care of a man who understood he was being trusted with something that mattered more than anything else discussed in this building today. I'll have legal start the paperwork this afternoon. I'd appreciate that, Elroy said. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Gordon put out his hand. Elroy shook it. Not the handshake of a deal closing or a meeting ending. The handshake of two people who had spent a night in a basement break room and a morning in a boardroom and had arrived somewhere neither of them had been before, and that neither of them had a word for yet, but that felt, in the specific way that true things felt, like solid ground. Gordon stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close. Elroy, he said. Elroy looked at him. Thank you. Just that, a flourish. No ceremony. The plainest version of the only true thing left to say. The doors closed. Elroy stood in the corridor for a moment. The sun had moved past the low amber angle of early morning and into the clear hard light of a Chicago October day, cold and brilliant and without apology. The kind of light that showed you everything exactly as it was. He took the main elevator down, crossed the marble lobby, said goodbye to Maurice, who was 20 minutes from the end of his shift and who returned the goodbye with the same unhurried dignity he brought to everything. Pushed through the glass door onto LaSalle Street. Chicago was fully awake now. People on the sidewalks, noise. A bus going by in the far lane. Two women in business clothes, walking fast and talking about something that sounded important. A man selling strong coffee from a cart on the corner, the smell of it hitting the cold air and traveling. Elroy stood on the sidewalk. No particular urgency, no destination that required him in the next 20 minutes. Just happening around him the way it happened regardless of what any individual within it had spent the night doing. His phone rang. Detroit area code. A number he recognized. He had not called her. He had thought about it in the break room at 4 in the morning. Thought about whether to reach out before any of this began. But the words had arrived in the right form, and the time had not felt right. And if he was being honest with himself, which he was trying to be with more consistency lately, he had not been sure she would pick up, he answered. Renee, Dad, her voice, the specific sound of it that was hers alone. He had not heard it in 11 months. I saw the news. They're running it everywhere, the story. She stopped. He could hear her breathing. It's you. Dad, it's you. Why didn't you tell me something was happening? He looked out at LaSalle Street, the morning traffic, the ordinary motion of the city going about its business. I didn't know how it would go, he said. I didn't want to tell you something was motion and then have nothing come from it. A silence. That's not the only reason, she said. He looked at his shoes as the ones he had polished this morning. Voice, no. He said, it's not the only reason.
It's another silence.
Longer. Detroit in the background of her line. A door. Traffic. I'm driving down, she said. Something moved in his chest, quick and specific. The particular feeling of something returning that had been absent long enough that its absence had started to feel permanent, which was its own kind of loss. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Dad, I'm just saying, Dad, I'm already in the car." He stood on LaSalle Street with his phone against his ear. He did not say anything for a moment. Neither did she. Just the sound of the line between them and Chicago around him, and Detroit around her, and the distance between the two cities that had felt, for 11 months, like something more than geography. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. He stayed on the sidewalk after the call ended. The coffee cart man on the corner glanced over. "Morning," the man said. "Morning," Elroy said. The man looked at him the way people sometimes looked at other people when something was visible on their face that they couldn't name but recognized as real. "Good one?" Elroy thought about the question. The full weight of what it could contain on a morning like this one. "Getting there," he said. The man nodded like that was the most sensible answer available. Because it was. 6 months later, the room on the 14th floor of Caldwell Financial Tower had no window. A rectangular table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard on the east wall, a projector that needed 4 minutes to warm up. The kind of room that existed in every large building and hosted training sessions and small meetings that did not rate the good rooms upstairs. Elroy had chosen it on purpose. He taught there every Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. The session was listed in the company calendar as internal controls and behavioral audit training. Attendance was voluntary. 11 people the first week, 17 the second. A waiting list now with 23 names on it. He taught from what he knew, not a textbook. The numbers and the behavior and the gap between the two. How a financial irregularity looked on paper and how it looked in a person before it showed up on paper. How to read both. How to hold both at the same time without letting one obscure the other. Deja Simmons sat in the front row every week. She took notes, detailed ones. She sent follow-up questions to Elroy after sessions, questions that were more sophisticated than the questions of analysts who had been doing this for a decade, because horizontal months of having your career taken from you gave you a particular relationship to the mechanisms of professional harm that no classroom could replicate. She was building the whistleblower protocol for the full organization. Independent reporting channels, protected disclosure procedures. A clear framework for what happened when someone saw something and needed to know that saying so would not cost everything. She had named it the Web Protocol. Elroy had told her 3 times to change the name to something functional. She had declined 3 times, politely, without apology, with the quiet certainty of a woman who had spent 4 months in a parking lot and come back from exactly which things she was and was not willing to negotiate. Today, she stayed after the others left, finishing a note about something he had said in the second hour about the difference between anomaly and pattern. He waited at the whiteboard, erasing the diagram he had drawn. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes, you knew for 9 months," she said. "You had the notebook and the FBI contact and Audra. You could have moved earlier." She looked up from her notes. "Why did you wait for that specific night?" He set the eraser down. "I didn't have Gordon yet," he said. "Best evidence needs someone with standing to carry it into the rooms where it matters. I needed someone involved enough that dismissing them was not an option, and desperate enough that they would actually listen past every reason not to." He paused. "I needed Brett's own actions to create the conditions. That night, they did." Deja was quiet for a moment. "The 4 months I lost," she said. Not accusing, just naming it. "Yes," he said, "I'm sorry for those months. If I had found a better way earlier, I would have taken it. I want to be clear about that." She looked at him for a long time. "I know," she said. She picked up her bag, walked to the door, then turned back. "My mother wants you to come for dinner," she said. "She has a speech prepared. I've tried to talk her out of it. She's not listening to me either." Elroy considered that. "Tell her I'd like that," he said. "When the time is right." Deja nodded. Left. Stood at the whiteboard alone for a moment. Then gathered his things, his coat, his bag, which held the Benjamin Graham book, and a legal pad of notes for next week's session, and the draft curriculum for the semester after this one. He took the main elevator down. Maurice was at the security desk, coming on for the afternoon. He had switched shifts 3 months ago. He returned Elroy's goodbye and then held up one finger, the universal signal, for 1 moment, and reached under the desk and produced a folded piece of paper. "Questions about the practice exam," Maurice said. "Number 14. I think the answer key is wrong." Elroy took the paper. Looked at question 14. Read it carefully. The answer key is right, he said. But I understand why it looks wrong. Read the definition of operational variance in section 3 again. The distinction is in the third sentence. Morpheus looked at the paper, nodded slowly, the nod of someone filing a thing correctly. Thank you, Morpheus said. You're going to pass it, Elroy said. Maurice looked at him. You think so? I know so, Elroy said. Section 3. He pushed through the glass door onto LaSalle Street. October again. The same cold, the same sky, the same city doing what it always did, moving forward without ceremony, making room for whatever came next without making a particular event of the making room. He walked north. He thought about the scholarship recipients. 4 of them in the first cohort. All first generation, all studying accounting or finance at Howard. He had received a letter from each of them. He kept the letters in the inside pocket of his bag, which was not a practical place for them and which he was not going to change. He thought about Renee, who had driven down from Detroit 6 months ago and who came now once a month, sometimes twice, and with whom he had learned over those visits to begin the conversations they had not known how to begin for 11 months. Slowly, without forcing. The way you rebuilt something that mattered by treating each piece of it with the care it deserved. He thought about Ruth, not with the specific weight he had carried for years, with something quieter. The way you thought about someone who was gone, but who had not left entirely, who lived in the things you chose, and the way you said them and the "standle yourselves off to" when no one was watching. She had told him once, late at night, in the office of Webb & Associates when he was working too late, and she had brought tea and stood behind him and put her hand on his shoulder, that the thing she loved most about him was that he did the right thing in the dark. Not for credit, not for the morning. In the dark, when no one would know either way, he had not always known in the years since whether that was still true. He thought now that maybe it was. He walked north on LaSalle Street in the October morning, the city around him. The L overhead, the smell of coffee and cold air and the lake somewhere beyond the buildings, that permanent mineral smell that was Chicago underneath everything else. He was not carrying anything that was not his. He was going wherever he decided to go next, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly enough.